During Christmas dinner, my mom criticized my baby in front of everyone. Her words were so cruel they left me completely speechless. I slowly stood up, gathered my daughter's gifts, and said, "This is her last Christmas here." That's when my mom suddenly started panicking and trying to take it all back, because she realized I truly meant it. And by New Year's, my daughter was no longer part of their holiday traditions. The moment I saw my daughter, tiny and struggling for breath, hooked up to a tangle of tubes, I made a silent, unshakable vow. Nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, would ever stand in the way of her safety or her peace. The living room glowed with the warm flicker of Christmas lights, carols played softly, and the air hummed with the joyful chaos of a big family gathering. Laughter mingled with the rustle of wrapping paper, painting a picture of perfect, festive harmony. Our daughter, Alara, was at the center of it all, wide-eyed and soaking up every sound, every smile. But beneath the surface of that idyllic scene, a storm was brewing, one I had spent years trying to ignore. Alara was born 6 weeks early. She spent the first 3 weeks of her life in the NICU, and those were the longest, most agonizing 3 weeks of mine. I'm not someone who wears his heart on his sleeve, but sitting in that hospital, watching her frail body breathe through tubes and monitors, it changes you. It rewires your priorities, permanently. Whatever she needed, I was going to make sure she had it. That was the deal I made with myself the moment I saw her for the first time. Those 3 weeks stretched out in a way I still can't fully explain. Every checkup was a small victory. Every steady monitor, every nurse who brought good news instead of a neutral expression. You learn to live in 15-minute intervals. When we finally brought her home, I don't think I slept a full night for the first 2 months. Not because anything was wrong, just because I needed to know she was there, breathing softly in her crib. By December, she was 8 months old. Healthy, happy, hitting every milestone her pediatrician set out for her. She was on the smaller side, sure, a little petite, but her doctor had been consistent from day one. She was perfectly fine. My wife, Chloe, and I are both on the shorter, lighter end ourselves, so it tracked genetically. We'd been cleared at every single checkup. No concerns, no flags, no follow-ups needed beyond the normal schedule. Now, Chloe's mother, Brenda. I'll be upfront. I've never fully trusted her. Chloe grew up with Brenda, so she'd built up a kind of tolerance for her over the years. The way you get used to a persistent draft in a house you've lived in long enough. But I hadn't grown up with her, so I never stopped noticing that chill. Brenda had commentary on everything Chloe did, and none of it was ever quite right. Her career path, the neighborhood we chose, the fact that we waited a few years to have kids, the names we considered for Alara. Brenda always had an angle, a concern, a suggestion that landed like a criticism wrapped in a question. For a long time, I kept my opinion of her to myself, mostly because Chloe asked me to. She said her mom was just like that, and it wasn't worth the energy of confronting it. I respected that. Chloe was the one who'd grown up in that house. She understood the dynamics better than I did. So I played it quiet. I gave Brenda the benefit of the doubt for years. I smiled at Christmas, made small talk at birthdays, did all the things you're supposed to do when you marry into a family that comes with its own complex baggage. That, in hindsight, was probably my mistake. Not a dramatic, explosive mistake, but the slow, compounding kind you don't notice until something finally makes it painfully obvious. This Christmas was at Chloe's parent house. It was a bigger gathering than usual. Chloe's brother, Ryan, and his wife, her aunt and uncle, her grandmother, a few cousins, about 15 people total. It was Alara's first big family holiday, and I was genuinely looking forward to it. Having a baby changes the whole energy of these gatherings, usually for the better. Everyone's a little softer, more patient, more focused on something good and pure. I actually thought maybe it would take some of the edge off Brenda, too. I thought maybe, just maybe, she would let herself just be a grandmother for one afternoon and leave the commentary at home. I should have known better. I had years of evidence. Brenda had already made one subtle strike before Christmas even happened. About 2 weeks out, she called Chloe to talk about the holiday and casually mentioned she'd been reading about babies born early, sometimes having developmental delays they didn't notice until later. She said she'd been watching videos online and was just keeping herself informed. Chloe told me about it that night. Asked if Brenda had followed it up with a question or an action item. Chloe said no. She just mentioned it and moved on, like she was leaving it in the room for us to think about. That was Brenda's style. Plant the seed, step back, let it grow. We got there mid-morning. The house smelled of food, and the TV was already on. Everyone filtered in over the first hour or so. Coats piled high on the chair by the door, kids running around. The usual controlled chaos of a family Christmas. Alara was dressed up, wide-eyed, taking it all in. She's at the age where everything is a spectacle and she loves attention. So, 15 adults cooing at her was basically the best day of her life up to that point. People were passing her around, making the usual adorable sounds, calling her beautiful. Chloe was relaxed. Even I had lowered my guard a little, which I'd regret. Then Brenda took her. She held Alara out at arm's length, not the warm, comforting hold where you pull a baby close to your chest. No, she held her away from her body with both hands, like you might hold a piece of fruit you're not sure about, scrutinizing it. I noticed it immediately. The room didn't, but I did. Then Brenda said it. Her voice, cutting through the festive hum, was loud enough to carry. She looks malnourished. Is she eating enough? I'm serious. She looks malnourished. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that drops suddenly, where you can practically hear the collective gasp when someone says something so unbelievably inappropriate that no one can quite believe they heard it. Chloe's aunt tried to change the subject, a weak, fumbling attempt. But Brenda kept going. She said when Ryan's kids were this age, they were twice Alara's size. She asked, and I want to be precise here because I've replayed this moment 1,000 times. She asked if maybe something was wrong with her. Said her head looked too big for her body. Said it wasn't normal. And then, she looked directly at Chloe, her own daughter, and said, maybe if she'd taken better care of herself during the pregnancy, the baby wouldn't have come early. I want to explain what that moment felt like, because it wasn't anger. Not right away. It was more like everything went very still. That particular stillness where your mind clears and you become completely aware of exactly what you're about to do, and you know you're going to do it, and you're not going to walk it back. Ever. I stood up, crossed the room, and without a word, without a raised voice, I took my daughter out of Brenda's arms. Calmly. I just took her. Then I walked into the living room where the gifts were all piled up, and I started loading them into Alara's diaper bag. Brenda followed me. Chloe's dad followed me, his face a mask of discomfort. Brenda was doing the thing she always did. Don't be so sensitive. I'm just expressing concern. You're being dramatic. I didn't engage with any of it. I just kept packing. When she got in front of me, trying to block my path, I looked at her. And I told her, this is the last Christmas here. She laughed. A dismissive, brittle sound. The kind of laugh someone makes when they're certain you're bluffing. I told her, you just called our daughter malnourished and implied that Chloe's actions caused a premature birth in front of the whole family at Christmas dinner. My voice was low, steady, devoid of heat, which I think unnerved her more than yelling ever would have. We are done. Chloe's dad tried the standard. Let's just calm down and enjoy the holiday routine. I told him. She said exactly what she meant. She always does. I grabbed every present we'd brought, ours and the gifts from other relatives who were actually capable of loving our daughter, without conditions attached. Brenda's gifts stayed under the tree. That's when her face changed. I watched it happen in real time. The casual dismissiveness melted, replaced by a dawning realization. She finally understood. We were actually leaving. Wait, you're really leaving? It's Christmas dinner. Yeah, we were really leaving. Chloe didn't say a word. She just followed me. We were out the door in under 10 minutes. The car ride home was completely quiet, except for Alara babbling in her car seat, completely oblivious, pulling at her socks. Chloe cried the whole drive. But not because she wanted to turn around. She cried because she was angry at herself for being surprised, for thinking that this time, after all these years, it would somehow be different. I understood that more than I let on. We ordered dinner that night instead of cooking, sat in the kitchen while Alara slept soundly in her crib. Neither of us talked about it for a while. I remember watching Chloe scroll through her phone, then putting it face down on the table twice without answering anything. The texts were already coming in. Her dad, her aunt, Ryan checking in. Nobody had called to say, hey, that was out of line. They called to manage the situation, to smooth things over. That told me everything I needed to know about how the family was going to play this. Host voiceover. Pause for a second. And for anyone listening, this is me, the host, not the Opie talking. I just want to point something out because it matters. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He didn't make a scene for 15 people to remember and talk about for years. He picked up his daughter, and he walked. That is the correct response when someone weaponizes your baby at Christmas dinner. You don't give them a reaction to feed off of. You don't give them a scene to reframe as you overreacting. You just quietly take what's yours and leave. The silence is the message. We got home and put the baby down. Then Chloe and I sat at the kitchen table, and I told her exactly where I stood. I said, what happened today wasn't a slip. It wasn't Brenda having a rough day or saying the wrong thing in the wrong moment. That was a pattern. The same pattern Chloe had been managing her whole life. And it just got applied to our daughter for the first time. The difference was, our daughter didn't sign up to absorb it. She doesn't have decades of conditioning telling her this is just how Brenda is. And I wasn't going to let her build that conditioning. Not from day one. Not for any reason. Chloe sat with that for a minute. I could see her working through it. She didn't argue. She didn't defend her mom the way she might have even a year earlier. She just nodded slowly and said, I know. She said she'd known for a while and had been hoping it wouldn't come to this. Chloe took a few more days to fully come around to what that meant in practical terms. She'd spent her whole life recalibrating her expectations around her mother, and drawing a genuine hard line felt foreign to her in a way I had to respect. I didn't push. I told her I'd follow her lead on the family side of things, but that I wouldn't pretend what Brenda said was something we could just move past without acknowledgement. Brenda's text started almost immediately. Over the first 3 days, she sent probably 30 messages. The range was something else. She opened with the non-apology version. I'm sorry you took it that way. Then she escalated to accusations. You're poisoning my granddaughter against me. Then came what I think was the most revealing text of the whole situation. The one where she said she had rights as a grandmother. Your granddaughter is 8 months old. She doesn't know what rights means. She barely knows what socks are for. I showed Chloe the texts as they came in. By day 3, Chloe was fully on the same page as me. Seeing it all laid out in writing made it hard to explain away. Hold on a minute. She went from, I was just concerned, to I have rights as a grandmother in under 72 hours. That's not someone who made a mistake and is trying to figure out how to fix it. That's someone who got a consequence they weren't expecting and immediately started building a legal argument in their head. The entitlement in that one sentence says more about this situation than anything that happened at the dinner table. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asserting ownership. New Year's Eve, Brenda showed up at our house. No call, no warning. Just pulled into the driveway like she'd been invited and we'd somehow forgotten to tell her. I answered the door because Chloe was feeding the baby. Brenda said she was there to see her granddaughter, that it was a new year and we were starting fresh. I told her that wasn't going to work for us right now. She tried to physically push past me into the house, stepped forward, put her hands against the door frame, tried to get through the gap. I blocked her and told her she needed to leave. She started crying immediately. A full performance. She said she had every right to see her, that she came because she loved her, that I couldn't keep her from her granddaughter. Chloe came to the door, with Alara on her hip. She took one look at Brenda, at the crocodile tears, and told her to go. Brenda asked for 5 minutes just to hold her. Chloe said no. Brenda called it cruel. Chloe looked her mother dead in the eye, and she said, and I want to be straight about this because she earned this line. She said, you called her malnourished. You said her head was too big for her body. You told me in front of everyone that my actions caused her early birth. And now you want to stand on my porch and call me cruel? Brenda tried to stammer. I was just worried. That's what mothers do. Chloe cut her off. No. That was what you did. specifically. And we are done letting you do it. Brenda stood on our front porch, crying for probably 10 solid minutes. Our neighbors were definitely watching from their windows. My read on it was that the audience was part of the plan. Eventually, Chloe's dad pulled up and came and walked her back to the car. He gave me a long look on the way past, the kind that was meant to convey that I was the problem in this situation. I held eye contact and let it go. After that, Brenda started working the family like a phone tree. Chloe's aunt called to say Brenda had always been a little tactless, but her heart was in the right place. I asked the aunt whether she'd be comfortable with someone calling her grandkids malnourished at Christmas dinner in front of the whole family. She didn't have an answer. The call ended pretty quickly after that. Ryan's wife sent Chloe a long message about how Brenda had been calling her every day, crying, and how hard all of this was on Brenda. The person at the center of the story as the victim was, apparently, Brenda. Then Chloe's grandmother got involved. A sharp woman, late 70s, always the one who tried to hold everyone together. She called Chloe and asked if she'd come over on Saturday to talk. Chloe said yes, because she genuinely loves her grandmother and thought maybe she'd actually be heard. She got to the house. Brenda was sitting in the living room. Ambush. Chloe called me from the car on her way back. She said her grandmother opened with wanting to bring the family together. And Brenda sat there with this smug expression, like she'd won something by tricking Chloe into showing up. Chloe asked her directly if she was willing to give a real apology, not the "I'm sorry you felt that way" version, an actual acknowledgement of what she said and why it was wrong. Brenda crossed her arms and said she wasn't going to apologize for caring about her granddaughter's health. So, Chloe left, just picked up her keys and walked out. The grandmother called later that night to apologize for letting herself be used as bait. She said Brenda had begged her for help, and she thought she was doing the right thing. Chloe told her she understood, but that it hurt. We weren't going to hold it against the grandmother. She's old. She loves everyone. She doesn't fully grasp the dynamics at play here. But we weren't going to pretend that move was okay either. Then the gifts started arriving. Every day, a package at our door. Baby clothes, toys, a stroller we didn't ask for and didn't need. All with little cards tucked inside. For my precious granddaughter. Thinking of you always. The first few we donated locally. Then we started writing, return to sender, on the boxes and sending them back unopened. The delivery guy started recognizing me. One afternoon he showed up with another package, looked at me and said, "Another one, huh?" "Yeah, buddy. Another one." Then Brenda called our daughter's pediatrician's office. She told them she was a concerned grandmother and asked to speak with the doctor about her granddaughter's weight. Obviously, the office couldn't share anything. Patient privacy laws are pretty clear. But they called us that afternoon to let us know someone had been inquiring about our daughter's care. I called Brenda directly for the first time since Christmas. I asked her why she'd called our pediatrician. She said she was worried and that she had no other way to know our daughter was okay since we wouldn't talk to her. I told her she had exactly one way. She could trust that the baby's parents had it handled. She told me she had a right as the grandmother. I told her she had zero rights to our daughter's medical information and zero access to any professional involved in her care. I told her to stop calling people.
She hung up on me.
Host voiceover, okay, stop. And for the listeners, this is me jumping in. She called the pediatrician to validate the malnourished comment she made at Christmas dinner. Let that land. She's not trying to help the baby. The baby is fine. Every doctor has confirmed this. She's trying to prove she was right. She tracked down the child's doctor and tried to recruit them into her side of an argument against a couple who just want to raise their kid in peace. That is not concern. That is obsession. Those are two very different things, and one of them has a paper trail. Chloe and I sat down and decided it was time to put everything in writing. We drafted a formal letter, sent by email and certified mail, so there was a clear record, and nobody could claim later they never received it. The letter laid out everything in plain language. What was said at Christmas and why it was harmful. Every action Brenda had taken since. Showing up unannounced, attempting to force entry into our home, using family members as intermediaries and setups, and contacting our daughter's medical provider without authorization. Then our terms going forward. No visits until a genuine apology was given. No contact with our daughter unless both of us were present. No discussing our family situation with relatives. And absolutely no contact with any professional involved in our daughter's care. We kept it factual. No dramatic language, just a clear record of what happened and what we expected going forward. Brenda's response was 3 pages long. Not an apology. 3 pages of how she was the real victim in this situation. How Chloe had always been too sensitive growing up. How she'd sacrificed everything for her family, and this was how she was being repaid. How I had poisoned Chloe against her own parents and her whole family. And at the very end, a note that she was consulting a lawyer about grandmother rights. I laughed out loud when I read that part. Then I looked it up. Our state has grandparent visitation statutes, but they're essentially limited to situations involving divorce, a deceased parent, or documented neglect or abuse. Married couple with a healthy kid who don't want to spend time with a toxic person? Not covered. Not remotely. Whatever lawyer she talked to, if she actually talked to one, would have told her the same thing within 5 minutes of reviewing the facts. But she still wasn't done. She started calling my parents. They're across the country. We see them twice a year, but we're close. Brenda called them to warn them about what kind of person Chloe really was. That she was unstable. That I'd brainwashed her. That the baby was being kept from her family, like some kind of hostage situation. My mom called us the same day. She said the call was strange from the beginning, that Brenda sounded off, that the things she was saying didn't track with anything my parents knew about us or about Chloe. She asked if we were okay. Chloe walked her through everything. My mom's response was immediate. That's genuinely unhinged behavior. She said those things about a baby, and then escalated to all of this? I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. And then she said something that hit Chloe harder than she expected. She told Chloe that she thought she was a wonderful mother and that she shouldn't let anyone make her doubt that for a second. Brenda's attempt to recruit my parents as allies completely backfired. They started checking in on us more regularly after that. Sent us a care package, some baby stuff, and a food basket for the 2 of us with a note that said, "You both deserve this." Before Brenda had even finished making her case, my parents were fully on our side. Host voiceover, wait, let me jump in here real quick. She called his parents. She picked up the phone and tried to flip his family against his wife. And his parents, who live across the country and barely knew the details, saw through it immediately, called to check on them, and then joined their corner. Brenda set out to build a coalition against this couple. And instead, she just kept adding people to their team. This is what happens when you go to war against someone who's actually done nothing wrong. The facts don't cooperate with your story. Everyone she calls ends up on the other side. We thought the formal letter would at least establish that we were serious, even if Brenda wasn't ready to respond appropriately.
We thought that.
And then she showed up at my gym. The one I've been going to for years. Same schedule, same parking spot, same routine. She waited in the lot and ambushed me when I came out. Just standing next to my car, not making a scene, just waiting. Calm in the specific way that isn't actually calm. She started talking before I could say anything. Said she just wanted to talk, that she was losing her granddaughter, that she was desperate and didn't know what else to do. I told her this wasn't the place for this. She asked where the place was, because we weren't answering calls. We weren't responding to anything. She had no other options. I told her she had exactly one option. She could apologize. An actual apology. Not the version where she apologizes for how I received her words. A real one that acknowledged what she said, and that it was wrong. She told me she had apologized. I told her, "I'm sorry you took it that way isn't an apology. That's blame. Those are different things." Then she grabbed my arm. Actually reached out and grabbed me and said, "Please, just let me see her once. I'll prove I can do better." I pulled my arm back sharply and told her if she didn't leave, I was calling the police right then.
She left.
I sat in my car for a few minutes after she pulled out of the lot, and I felt something I wasn't fully expecting. Not anger, something closer to a kind of sad clarity. Not for me, not for us specifically. Just the feeling of watching someone throw away everything they had because they couldn't say 5 words. She had a healthy granddaughter, a son-in-law who'd given her years of benefit of the doubt, a daughter who'd spent her whole life trying to earn her approval. A family Christmas she could have been part of. All she had to do was say, "I'm sorry. I was wrong." Instead, she was in a gym parking lot, grabbing a stranger's arm. That night, Chloe and I talked. We'd both known where it was going for a while. We just needed this to confirm it.
Full no contact.
Not conditional on an apology. Not temporary. Not a pause we'd revisit in 6 months.
Done.
The door wasn't cracked. It was closed. The thing that shook us most about the gym wasn't the confrontation itself. It was that she'd researched where I worked out, figured out my schedule, and sat in a parking lot waiting for me to walk out. That's not someone who made a mistake and is trying to make it right. That's someone who has decided the rules don't apply to her and will keep testing boundaries until someone physically stops her. We weren't going to wait for the next escalation to find out what that looked like. I sent one final message. I told her that by tracking me down at my gym and putting her hands on me, she'd removed any remaining possibility of this being resolved. I told her not to contact us, not to contact our family, not to approach anywhere we regularly went. I told her any further attempts would be documented, and we would pursue a restraining order without hesitation. This was not a negotiation. Then I blocked her on everything. Chloe did the same. Brenda's husband sent Chloe a text saying he hoped she was happy that her mother was devastated over a few mistakes. A few mistakes is one way to characterize it, I guess. We didn't respond. Blocked him too. It's been a few months now, and the picture looks different than I expected. Ryan, Chloe's brother, reached out on his own, separately from the rest of the family. Not to pressure us. Not to lobby for reconciliation or tell us to be the bigger people. He called to tell us that he and his wife had pulled back from Brenda and her dad, too. Apparently, Brenda had been making comments about Ryan's son's weight for years. His wife had been quietly absorbing it because she didn't want to be the one who made things difficult. Watching Chloe draw a hard line made her realize she should have done the same thing a long time ago. Ryan apologized to Chloe directly for telling her to be the bigger person right after Christmas. He said he'd spent years using that phrase to protect himself from conflict rather than to actually help his sister. Said watching this whole situation unfold showed him what he'd been doing. His wife got on the phone too. Said she wished she'd had the same willingness to draw a line earlier. They're low contact with Brenda now and told her directly to her face that her behavior was unacceptable. So Brenda, in trying to isolate us, accidentally gave us Ryan and his whole family. That's something I keep coming back to. Every move she made after Christmas was supposed to strengthen her position. The texts, the ambush, the gifts, the letters, the calls to my parents, the gym. And every single one of them did the opposite. It's like she had a map that she was following confidently, but the map was wrong. And instead of stopping to check it, she just walked faster. Chloe's aunt, the one who called us harsh in the beginning and had always been Brenda's closest ally in the family, reached out a couple weeks later. Said she'd been thinking about what Chloe asked her on the phone. Would she be okay with someone calling her grandkids malnourished? Said she wouldn't. Apologized for not seeing it the right way the first time. When Brenda's own closest ally moved to our side, I don't think that went unnoticed in the family. Chloe's grandmother has stayed neutral, which I completely respect. She's not going to cut off her own daughter at her age, and we're not asking her to. She's called Chloe a few times, apologized for the ambush situation, told us she respects our decision. She also mentioned, and this was worth knowing, that Brenda had been telling extended relatives that Chloe had lost her mind, and that I was the one controlling everything and keeping her from her family. Some relatives bought it, some didn't. At some point, we both stopped caring. The people who knew us knew the truth, and the people who didn't know us well enough to ask weren't going to affect our lives either way. From what gets filtered back through the grapevine, Brenda isn't doing well. And I want to be straight about how I feel about that because it's not what you might expect. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like justice. It just feels like something that didn't have to happen. She's in a situation entirely of her own making. And there's something genuinely painful about watching someone choose their pride over every single thing that mattered in their life, and then act confused about where they ended up. Her husband is apparently worn out from managing her. Some of her longtime friends have put distance between themselves and her because even they think she went too far. My dad used to say that most people don't change because they want to. They change because the cost of staying the same finally outweighs the cost of doing the work. I think Brenda always believed the people around her would absorb the cost forever. Chloe had been absorbing it for 32 years. We just became the ones who stopped. All she had to do was say the words. 5 words. I'm sorry. I was wrong. That's it. That's the whole ask.
She chose not to.
That choice belongs entirely to her. Our daughter, Alara, is crawling everywhere now, pulling herself up on furniture, getting into everything that isn't nailed down, laughing at ceiling fans like they're the funniest things she's ever seen. She has no idea that any of this happened. She has 2 sets of grandparents who love her without conditions attached to that love. She has an aunt and uncle who genuinely adore her. She has cousins she's going to grow up around. She has parents who made it clear pretty early in her life that nobody gets to make her feel like she is anything less than exactly what she is. That's what walking out that door on Christmas actually built. Not a broken family. A smaller one, but without weak spots. For anyone going through something similar, a parent or in-law who thinks their access to your kids is non-negotiable, that entitlement cancels out behavior, that love is a word they get to use while acting in the opposite direction. You're allowed to choose peace. You're allowed to protect your kids from that. You're allowed to stop absorbing it because absorbing it is what you were trained to do. It was the hardest call we made. I'd make it the same way every time. If you're sitting on a situation like this, someone in your family who thinks consequences don't apply to them, take notes. No yelling, no scenes, no begging them to understand. You just pick up your kid and you walk. That's what strength actually looks like when it's not performing. Drop a comment. Did he draw the line at the right moment, or should he have pulled the trigger sooner? And if you want more stories in this lane, hit subscribe. We've got a whole lineup coming. See you in the next one.